Hello chess friends and welcome to Azadov's chess channel and welcome to the round 7 of the Magnus Carlsen Invitational tournament in 2020. So we're continuing to follow the biggest online chess event in history, and today's most interesting game, I think, it's world champion Magnus Carlsen against the leader of the candidates tournament, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. It's really a great battle, I think, because Maxime with the black pieces chooses always this dynamic openings like the Grunfeld, for instance, against d4 and the Najdorf against e4, so we can expect really some great tactical battles. On the other hand, Magnus chooses, you see, also against Caruana, he chooses to play this Alekhand defense, which was a surprise, but basically Magnus can play what he wants to, and here I think we'll have a perfect match game between the two top, maybe now the two top best players these days. So here e4 played by Magnus. We have c5. So you see Maxime is trying to go into the Najdorf. Knight to f3, d6, d4 still comes here, of course. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and after knight to f6, here already a surprise by Magnus. Bishop to c4, leaving this e4 pawn hanging. Very aggressive line. If you, for instance, take this knight, then queen to h5 is very dangerous if you try to cover here with potential e6 moves. Bishop to e6 doesn't work immediately. That's the problem. It seems that black cannot take this bishop, but there is a tactical problem. After bishop takes e6, knight takes e6, and now queen to e7. So this knight to e6 is only possible if, for instance, this knight would be here on d7, then a fork possibility could happen. I'm telling you this because here, after the move queen to h5 and e6, taking the pawn is not the best choice. First, you should play bishop to b5. I just wanted to show you this possible line. After something like bishop to d7, now it's time to take this pawn, because this queen to e7 idea doesn't work as you get knight to c7. So you see, it's very important to bring this bishop first in between somehow and then try this attack. So of course here Maxime Vachier-Lagrave didn't fall into opening trap. He played the natural move e6 with preparations in some occasions even to push the pawn on d5. And now castling played by Magnus, and now I think it's really time for Maxime to take this pawn. It's really a must move, I think. If you don't do that, you basically get on the passive side. Maybe Magnus can proceed with some bishop to f6 ideas, but I still think you can cover everything with potential d5, really cementing our knight here. I'm not sure why Maxime didn't take now this pawn. Maybe he saw some other tactical possibilities for Magnus, but now after castling, bishop to e7, bishop to d3 finally played by Carlsen. I think in that particular moment Maxime should have taken the pawn. In the game knight to c6, we have knight takes c6 by Magnus, we have b takes c6, and now c4. Going into sort of a Maroczy-bind setup, which is of course a very positional line now. You see from this tactical opening it becomes now really a positional game. One of the main ideas for black here is to crack the position with the move d5, but Maxime Vachier-Lagrave first secured the king. Of course we want to have first king security, then push the pawn in the center, and Magnus proceeds with the natural knight to c3. We have e5. You see d5, it seems like a breakthrough, but it would be really a bad move, at least for a while now, because after potential c takes d5, we have c takes d5, and it's now the problem that white doesn't have to take the pawn on d5. Black would love that white takes, and then after knight takes d5, really would have black would really have a firm pawn structure in the center and really a compact position. But now e5 will happen. That's the main problem. After something like knight to d7, we could go rook to e1, and you see this is really sort of a Greek gift attack here, possibility here for Magnus, aiming these two bishops against the king. The king doesn't have any defenders like the knight or the king, so only the pawns are in front of the king. Maybe in some occasions white could try something like rook to e3 and then rook to h3, really creating some dangerous attacks. Queen to h5 is a possibility, so I think it would be really a great position for Magnus. So that's why here e5 played by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, building a very flexible pawn structure, still with the possibilities to push the pawn on d5 if the position allows it, but it's really a preparation. And now Magnus played the move bishop to e3, we have bishop to e6. Magnus proceeds with queen to e2, finishing the development. A very healthy move, connecting the rooks. Now we want to play our rook on the d file where the queen is. Then, of course, we would prevent, at least for a while, this potential d5 pawn breakthrough. In the game, knight to d7, played by Maxime, and now rook to d1. Very, very tricky move, very pressuring move really by Magnus. The queen is on the same file, so that's why queen to c7 played by Maxime, and now b4. This is a necessary move because black could proceed here with a very nice position idea to play the move knight to c5 and a5, creating sort of a blocking system, still with the possibility, as the knight is protected also by the bishop, and then really to crack the position with the move d5. So this knight to c5 is really a common idea against the Maroczy bind. This is the pawn structure that white has built here, the c4 and d4 setup. I've mentioned this many times in my videos, in my basics in chess videos, in my Dragon Sicilian preparations. You can check out my battle videos against the Maroczy bind. This knight to c5 is really a common position idea, so that's why Magnus prevents this idea with the move b4. And we have a5, cracking this annoying pawn, which restricts this c5 square, so that's why we have a3, a takes b, rook takes a1, still forced moves, of course, rook takes a1, and now rook to b8, attacking the b pawn, and now rook to b1. And here Maxime realizes that no outpost will be possible with this move knight to c5. He tries to reorganize a little bit and really prepare this move d5. And Magnus played this natural h3, prevents also this knight to g4 moves because this bishop could be attacked, and now we have finally the move d5. But you see, Maxime played this many maneuvers with the knight. Now there is a positional problem about this move d5. Here Magnus simply trades off everything. In the center, c takes d, we have c takes d, e takes d, knight takes d, everything is forced, of course. But after bishop to d5, we have really a tricky move, b5. And one of the main endgame ideas in chess, when you play with the bishop pair against the bishop pair, is to create a passed pawn. Still, there are of course many pieces on the board, like the rook, like the queen, for both sides. But again, we always evaluate, most of the times you should really evaluate your positions by the minor pieces that you have on the board. But it's still an endgame, although there are many pieces on the board, and still this passed pawn, I think, is really an annoying one. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has to be careful in order to don't allow this pawn to make progress. So that's why he played a very aggressive e4. He wants to at least keep Magnus busy here, and Magnus played queen to h5, which wasn't basically the most of accurate moves. Here queen to bishop to c2 is, I think, a better possibility, because it seems now that bishop to c4 is dangerous, but it's really not a problem because we have a very, very tricky move here, b6. Counter-attacking, that's the main problem. And if you take, for instance, the queen, then we have b takes c7. If you try rook to b8, then we have rook to c8, then we have rook to b8. And you would be forced to play something like bishop to a6, then bishop to e4 is very tricky. And now you have to play the move g6, because the serious threat is here to play the move bishop to f5. After the g6, white could proceed here for this could be, I think, a good continuation here from Magnus with the move bishop to f4, king to g7, getting out of this very annoying attack, because the rook is always pinned to this king of a little bit, so we want to get our king from the h file. But now bishop to c6, you see, with preparations to play something like bishop to d7. So here in this position, I think white has a comfortable game. Maybe it can be prevented after the move bishop to g6 and here bishop to f4. You could try maybe to go with your king here to f8 immediately, but now after bishop to c6, you see still we're restricting the king's ability to come into the game. It's really, really tricky here to play for black. I'm not seeing clear lines how you should defend here. I think white is simply better, but the problem is here after the move b6 and after potential trades, Here, black could even trade off the rooks, but still, white has a comfortable game after bishop to b1, bishop to a6. Still, we can take this pawn. That's the main issue here. And after something like g6, bishop to c6, and now bishop to c8 is some kind of a defensive idea, but now bishop to b6 again, king to f8, and now simply going with our king. If this king tries to attack this pawn on c7, then we have always the opportunity to play bishop to c5, and this king will never be able to attack the pawn. And now it's time to get with our king somehow into the attack. This pawn is, I think, too much to handle. So here Magnus missed, I think, this tactics he played after the move e4. Still, it's, I think, the second best move, queen to h5, at counter-attacking the bishop. We have e takes d, queen takes d5, and now rook to d8, and Magnus played queen to e4. Bishop to f8, very important move now in this game. You saw the problems when this pawn, for instance, comes on b7. Then if the rook comes on the 8th rank, now Maxime Vachier-Lagrave covers everything with this bishop to f8 idea, and Magnus simply continues to push forward. Here in this position, if you try to push the pawn immediately on d2, it's not such a good idea, because it can always be met with the move rook to d1. In the next move, I think we can simply take the pawn. The problem is the queen cannot attack this pawn here on b6 or on b7. It could attack the pawn on b8, but you see the queen is a little bit stuck to the defense of this e7 bishop, so that's why this bishop to f8 move was really necessary. And now Magnus simply pushed b6. We have queen to c2, rook to c1, and now Maxime Vachier-Lagrave plays really a mistake. Queen to b3. The better idea is here to play queen to b2, and Magnus could proceed here with move b7, but it would be a mistake, because now Maxime could counterattack with the move with the move d2. We have rook to d1 counterattacking, but now rook to b8 solves everything. If we take the pawn here, black will simply take this pawn with the queen. It will be a really equalish game. So, but in this position, Magnus doesn't need to push the pawn immediately. He can go queen to c4, which is much better. And if black would maybe try to get some breathing space, but if black, for instance, tries to counterattack this pawn immediately, you see now we would have the opportunity. Still, this pawn is protected, and we would have now opportunities to play queen to c7 with b7 and b8 possibilities, and then finally to take out this pawn. So it's really a mistake to place the queen here on b3 by Maxime, and Magnus didn't play really this accurate move. He should have proceeded here with the move. He played the move queen to f3, but now I think b7 is winning immediately. If you try now b2, which seems like a dangerous move, then we can simply sacrifice the bishop. Magnus was really low on time in this position. Magnus played this inaccurate queen to f3, because here if you take rook to d2, then we can simply play rook to c8. You could make maybe a check, king to h2. Bishop to d6 doesn't bring you so much, as we can cover with the move g3. So now after rook to b1, here we can simply play on the promotion, or even a stronger idea is to play queen to e7, and it would be game over. Magnus missed this move immediately b7, was a little bit scared also by black's potential d2 d1, but he was on low on time. As I mentioned, he maybe didn't calculate everything. It really was a fast game now, and he played this inaccurate move queen to f3. Now b2 is a possibility, as the pawn is not on the 7th rank, it's still on the 6th rank, and Magnus had to defend with rook to d1. We have h6 creating some breathing space, and now b7, rook to b8. After trades of pawns, this is really a symmetrical game, no pass pawns, or basically you can only win this game if black or white makes a blunder. But of course, in this top grandmaster level, even even with low time on the clock, still this is of course playable. g4, we have rook to b8, king to g2, rook to e8, rook to d7, attacking this f7, queen to e6, and here after trades of queens we have really a simplification. Magnus tried here some pawn breakthroughs with h5, but now g5, we have king to f3, bishop to f6, king to e2, another problem, king to d3, and here Maxime Vachier-Lagrave simply played on this very important idea to always have the opportunity to check white's king on the first rank. Magnus tried f4, we have g takes f4, bishop takes f4, rook to a3, creating a check, and now here after king to f5, bishop to b2 was played, and here a couple of perpetuals were played, and in this position both of these players agreed to a draw. So here was the critical moment. In this particular moment, Magnus played this inaccurate queen to f3. As you saw, b7 was winning the game, d2 simply taking after rook takes d2, now rook to c8 was winning. Magnus didn't see it, but it was still a dynamic game with this surprise again by Magnus Carlsen with his bishop to c4, leaving the pawn in the center hanging tactical idea. Okay, we'll see what will happen in the continuation of the match game. I'm really looking forward. I'll cover, I think, more games from this match game between Magnus Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games from the tournament. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.